I have always loved adventure. As a kid, I would go camping as often as I could, and every time, it was the highlight of my year. As I grew up, I have kept this love of adventure and the outdoors. Around 5 years ago, I started making my own films. They were mostly little skits, often made with my cousins, Elwyn, Ollie, and Diesel, and my friends, Orland and Flynn. Some of you have probably seen them. 2 years ago, I made my first adventure film. I hiked the first section of the Hyson Trail, from Cape Travis to Victor Harbour, with Elwyn and Orland. The film I made reached the finals in the Nature Festival film competition in SA and was screened at the Mercury Cinema. I also entered that film in a youth filmmaking competition called Realise, where I won first place in SA for my age category. I won a trip to Sydney to see my film in the cinema and go to the awards ceremony, where I received a cash prize of $350. This film I made combines my love of adventure with my love of filmmaking. I took these two passions of mine, adventure and filmmaking, and designed my Year 12 project from them. I had grand ideas to make 4 adventure films this year, each one with the theme of a season and an outdoor sport. This idea of a film for each season ties into the Waldorf tradition of celebrating the seasons with fairs or festivals. Throughout my project, I have been exploring the inspirational nature of films and researching what specific parts of a film make it inspiring. I found that the story behind a film is the most important, and I ran a survey at our project showcase, with most answers believing the connection to nature is the most important. This showed me that everyone sees my films in their own unique way, but I believe that as long as I put my energy into them and focus on what I think is important, the quality of my films will reflect this. At this point, you're probably wondering what films I made this year and how I went about them. I started my summer film when our class went on the Year 12 scuba camp in our first week back to school. It was a perfect first film because it was a trip I was already going on. I had a great time on the camp, hanging out with the class, and at the end of it, I got my open water diver's license, which I can use anywhere in the world. I had a goal of documenting everything that happened on the camp, both the fun moments and the parts that go wrong. Something always goes wrong on camp. For us, it was the food on the first night. We were going to order pizza, but everything was closed. Despite this, it was one of the best school camps I've been on. On a trip that good, the little things that don't go to plan just fade away, especially when remembering it almost a year later. One of the best parts of the camp was taking my camera down scuba diving. This was really cool because I've never done that before. I didn't have much of a plan for the actual film, mostly because I didn't really know what would happen on the camp or when I could film things. For example, I found out that I was only allowed to bring my dive camera on the last of 4 dives we did. Without a plan to guide me, I shot heaps of footage without a story or theme to tie it all together. When I got back home, I spent many months afterwards trying to create a story from the footage I had gathered, without much success. I realized the issue was that I needed a story for my film, but I was struggling to find one in the hours of raw footage. I had always known this would be a problem, because as I have learned from past experience, the only way to film a trip properly is to plan it with the film as the #1 goal. When I couldn't think of a way to tell the story by myself, I decided to get the help of the class. We had a class dinner coming up, and I made a plan to bring along a couple of microphones and film something a bit like an interview, but more like a catch-up, where we talked about and remembered the camp. My plan was to start the film at that dinner, with us remembering the trip, and then cut to clips from the adventure as we mentioned them. It didn't go as well as I had planned. We kept interrupting each other and forgetting things, then adding them later, and it all felt so forced. The story I had hoped to get from it just wasn't there. This was quite disappointing because I thought I had found a solution to the issue of the scuba film story. On top of that, when I got home, one of the microphones I used had failed, and there was a hissing noise on the entire audio track. In a way, it was a good time for this to happen because I didn't use the audio anyway. At this point, it was already April, and I still didn't know what to do for the scuba film story. The dinner wasn't entirely wasted because I got my next idea for the story by bouncing off what I liked from the class interview, the idea of us retelling the adventure. I decided to write and record a voiceover for the film, spoken by me, in the style of me telling the story of the camp to the viewer, like you would to a friend. This idea fit perfectly, and I wrote the whole script for it in a couple of days. Once I had this voiceover, the rest of the clips fell into place, and I knew what footage I needed. Despite only being able to bring the camera on one of the 4 dives, I got enough underwater footage. More of the film is above the water than below, but we spent a lot more time above the water too. One trick I used was splitting the underwater footage into 2 sections to show how we had 2 diving days. This was actually what happened on the camp, so I was keeping the story accurate. It also makes the film more engaging, because I found a long section of underwater footage can become a little boring. Now, I will talk about some of the technical aspects for making a good film, which I discovered while editing the scuba film. The opening scene of the scuba film is footage from our Year 11 school camp to the Grampians. I chose this footage because the first section of the voiceover I wrote describes all Waldorf camps and what I believe makes them unique. Do you know what makes a Waldorf school camp so special? It's not the hikes you go on, or the places you stay, or the bus trips, or the food. It's the people you go with. Alone, our camps would be harsh and monotonous. Together, they are an adventure. With these people you grow to know so well, you experience everything nature can throw at you, and the shared memories stay with you forever. Yeah, you're right, the awesome places we get to go help make them special too. This is an important message because the story of the film is that adventure is better together. It also relates to the importance of story in filmmaking because it is the people in the film which the story is built around. My research in this project was mostly around the importance of story and concluding that it is the most important part of a film. Once I had the voiceover and all of the footage I chose to use in its final place, I went on to sound design and color grading. These are both crucial to making a good film, but often go unseen to most people. It is only when they are missing that it is obvious. I am now going to show you a section of my scuba film, first as a finished piece, and second without any sound design or color grading. When we are all in the water, we float for a bit and go over the drills we will be doing before sinking to the bottom. It's such a strange feeling being able to float and breathe underwater. It's a big difference, isn't it? Sound design is the technique of adding sound effects that weren't recorded with the footage to make a film more immersive. Often the audio accompanying a clip is discarded and replaced with something different. This can be anything from music to sounds that would have been present at the location it was filmed, like the noise of the ocean. Even my voiceover is included in sound design. This is what my timeline looks like in my editing software. All the green sections there near the bottom are the sound effects that I added. The light brown is my voiceover, and the dark brown is music. Color grading is one of the last stages a film goes through. First, any footage that is shot badly, for example, underexposed or too warm, is fixed. Next, the creative process starts. In my own color grading, I focus on using color to reflect the style of the film. At the start of my scuba film, I lowered the contrast and saturation of the footage in the Grampians and darkened the edges of the clips, all with the goal of making it look like old footage. This accentuates the idea that this camp was in the past. For the rest of the film, I used a color grading technique I have created myself. I used the same technique on a film I made later this year. I tint the highlights slightly warmer, which emphasizes the sunlight hitting them, and make the shadows a little greener. I find this technique works really well because I'm often filming in nature, and the greener shadows help make the foliage stand out. Although I am tinting parts of the image, I make sure this doesn't affect the pure black or white areas of the shots. If the grade crept into these areas, the style would be much more extreme. Here is an example of my color grading workflow. Straight from my camera, all my footage looks like this. It's a bit flat and boring, right? This is called log footage, and it is used to keep as much dynamic range as possible in the image. Dynamic range is the amount of detail between pure black and pure white, and by bringing everything towards the middle of this scale, the camera can keep more detail. The first thing I do is apply a preset which converts this log footage into something closer to what we see with our eyes. Next, I fix any exposure issues. Now, I apply my personal grade preset, which is the one I talked about earlier. After that, I change any colors I don't like in the image. In this one, I change the color of the sky. And I have to repeat this process for every clip in a film. I learned so much from the scuba film and my research this year. Planning the story behind a film is very important because it helps guide me while capturing footage, and it makes the editing process so much easier. It also makes the film have a greater impact on the viewer. On May 29th, DaVinci Resolve, my editing software, suddenly stopped working. Every time I tried to open it, it froze on the loading screen. I had no idea why until I spotted an error message. I realized this was because I'd been sharing a license for it with a friend, and something must have changed so that only one of us could use it. I tried reinstalling, but no luck. It was still locked, and I was stuck without access for almost a month. Luckily, my friend Oscar let me borrow his gaming laptop, which meant I could keep editing my film. At the same time, I kept trying different ways to get DaVinci Resolve back on my own laptop. After a lot of trial and error, I found that doing a factory reset worked temporarily. To keep it running, I set up some extra configurations, and finally, I was back on my own laptop and could continue editing without interruptions. Around March, although the scuba film wasn't finished yet, I decided to start planning my second film, which was about mountain biking. This was going to be my autumn film. I had big plans for this one. My mate Taj agreed to be in it, and I was going to interview him with some questions along the lines of, how did you get into mountain biking? And what do you love about mountain biking? I was going to use this question to formulate the story behind the film. In July, I went out to catch up with Taj and his mates and film for a couple of hours. I told him about my idea for the film and how I wanted to interview him. We talked, and I got some practice filming their bikes. He told me he had a race coming up in a few weeks, and I thought this would be a perfect focus for the full film. I would interview him before it, and then use the footage I had already got to show him practicing. At this point, I was still working on my scuba film. I didn't get a chance to interview Taj before the race because I was too busy, but I still went along, hoping to get some good footage for the film. The race was at Fox Creek, and it was being hosted by Inside Line Downhill. I barely saw Taj at the race because he did one practice run and then had to wait at the bottom of the track for a bus for hours while I was at the top. I put my action camera on him for the race, but even with that, I had barely any footage. After the race, I had to push the project to the back of my mind again so I could finish the scuba film. It was a little frustrating that I didn't get any good footage at the race, but at this point, the scuba film was showing its potential, and I decided I would rather make it really good instead of splitting my energy between the two films. I did get a whole lot of photos while the race was on of all the other riders, as well as one of Taj, and I edited these and got them to the riders through the race's Instagram page. This felt good to give them some photos of them racing, and I could include it in my community aspect for my project. Some of the riders reached out to me on Instagram and thanked me for the photos. Here's some of the best photos I thought I got. I was now on track to finish the scuba film before my next film started, which I was planning to make in the winter holidays. This film was about snowboarding. I had been looking forward to the snow trip because it was an epic adventure on the same scale as the scuba camp, but I was planning it with the goal of making the film. As I said earlier, this is one of the most important things to make an adventure film successful. We were going to Mount Buller, just Oscar and I, and we were going to take his van to sleep in. My plans for the snow trip were all thrown away when Oscar injured himself. He can tell you more about that later. Without him, I didn't have a companion or a place to stay. When I realized I couldn't go to the snow and make this film I had been planning, I became a bit lost. The snow trip was going to be in the last week of the holidays, and I had a trip to the Flinders Ranges with my family planned for the first week. I decided to take my camera, but not to make a film, because I wanted to spend the time with my family rather than behind my camera. Instead, I took a series of photos that I could use for research purposes in comparing the inspirational nature of photos and film. Although it was disappointing that I couldn't go to the snow, the pressure was off on the scuba film, and instead of rushing it, I took my time on the color grading and sound design to make it as good as possible. It was almost finished before I went to the Flinders Ranges, and I did the final touches in the winter holidays. When term 3 came around, I decided to focus on the mountain bike film. I chose to make it with the footage I had so far and scrap the interview idea. Without the interview, I didn't have a story to build on because I didn't want to just make it up. I decided to accept this and move on, which was a difficult decision after discovering the importance of story in my research and during the scuba film. At least it made the editing process much easier because I had less to think about. Rather than filming and editing an interview and then planning what shots I needed to get, I just had to edit the footage I already had. I did this by sorting through everything I had and moving all the usable footage onto a different timeline. I then chose the best angle I had of each section of the track. Next, I color graded it and added some sound design, mostly of the bikes. When I went to select music, the very first track I listened to was perfect. This was a nice surprise because I would usually spend hours looking for the right track. After the struggle of editing the scuba film, I was glad this one came together so much easier, but a little sad I didn't have enough time to make it better. The part of the mountain bike film I was most happy with was some drone footage that I got at the practice run. I followed Taj and his friends down the track with the drone, and I thought it looked quite good. In the end, the film was only 2 minutes long, with no story aspect, but it looked nice and had a good flow. I had enough footage to make it look like a good bike line, rather than random clips cut together. Here's some of the drone footage that I got. I wanted to finish my mountain bike film before showcase so I could display it there. I finished it successfully, and I believe the showcase went well. I was proud of the setup I had. My 2 films were playing on separate monitors, and I had the timeline of the scuba film open in DaVinci Resolve on my laptop, and the photos I took in the Flinders Ranges were printed on the wall behind me. At the showcase, I ran a survey to help with my project research. In my survey, I asked questions about how films inspire people. I hoped that this could back up my research and add to my findings around my project question. I formulated the survey by asking myself what answers could help me most. I settled on 4 questions along the lines of what inspires you about an adventure film and what is the most important part of an adventure film. The answers on this survey varied, but the majority said that they believed the connection to nature was the most inspiring part of my films. As a filmmaker, I value that connection to nature, and it is one of the reasons I love making adventure films. But I find the sense of accomplishment is the most inspirational, and that is why the story matters to me. After the showcase, I decided to focus on my project research and my community aspect, rather than making another film. With school ramping up towards the end of the year, I felt I didn't have enough time left to plan, shoot, and edit a film that was up to my standards. This was disappointing because it left me with only 2 films, but my research and community aspect were more important. For my community aspect, my first idea was to host a film festival with the theme of adventure. I emailed many camping gear businesses asking them to sponsor the festival, but when I got no response, I decided to chip in some of my own prize money. Next, I had to plan the night. I met with Elise to organise a day for it and create consent forms. So far, everything was running smoothly. To promote the film festival, I had spoken about it multiple times in assembly. The week before the film festival, when I wanted the films in to give me time to judge them, no one had submitted. I thought about extending it, but I asked around and realised no one had even started a film. In the end, I had to cancel it entirely. Throughout the year, I had multiple people tell me their ideas for the film festival, but I think it just got pushed away so they could focus on more important things. When the film festival fell through, I was not sure what to do for my community aspect. While I was trying to find a new idea, Rose offered to let me teach the Year 10 and 11 photography elective. This offering came at a perfect time for me. At the first lesson, I observed the class and helped them where I could. They were working on designing a magazine poster in Photoshop. The next week, I had prepared a plan and I took over from Rose for that lesson. I focused on realistic photo manipulation in Photoshop. I chose this topic because I know a lot about it and it is relevant to photography, but also quite unique to Photoshop, which the class had the opportunity to use. I believe my skills provided a positive influence on their learning and perhaps left them with a new skill. Now that I have reached the end of the year and I am reflecting on my project, I am so glad I chose this topic. Despite all the hurdles that slowed me down, I still have 2 films I am proud of, and I expanded my knowledge and experience in filmmaking. I also got to spend time outdoors, going on awesome adventures in the company of some of my best friends. I learned some important skills, like planning a trip and a film, and the importance of story. My goal this year was to understand what aspects of filmmaking might inspire others to go out on their own adventures. Although I can't show my whole films here, I hope this speech has inspired you to go watch one of my films and allow yourself to be inspired.